So we did a similar to this one like this in 3.3, where now the equation is not given, but the graphs are given. And so we need to see what's happened. And last time we did this question, we would go with our original graph. So the original graph is f of x, and g of x, the blue one, is the image after a combination of transformations. And the corresponding points are labeled. So we know that if we started with point A on the red graph, which is at 0, 8, transformations could have happened, and we end up with 0, 0, which is A prime on the blue graph. And similarly, we have the point B, which is at 2, -8. Transformations happen, and we end up with, oh, sorry, I labeled the point wrong. A prime happens to be at -2, 0. And B prime is at 0, -8. I'll just wait for the computer to catch up. Now, what makes this last time, when we did this in 3.3, we could just figure it out using method 1, where we just looked at the arrows, and I could say, oh, I can see how I get from 0, 8 to -2, 0, because only one thing happened to the x, and only one thing happened to the y. But now, we have to multiply by something and add or subtract to make it work. And that's a little bit harder to do mental math. You might get lucky and guess correctly. Oh, looks like my pens are working. Slowly, maybe I have to. Right slow. So we have to, in this one, go to that method 2. So we have to look at the horizontal and vertical changes on the red graph. If we go from A to B, horizontally from A to B, we go 2 to the right. So I'm going to show 2 to the right by going +2. To the left, I would go -2. And then on my blue graph, I'm going to look at the horizontal distance from A prime to B prime. So all we're looking at is the changes in the x values. Can you see when you go from A prime to B prime, your horizontal change is still +2. Since your horizontal distance hasn't changed, we could say that your x values have to get multiplied by 1 because they're not changing. That's going to tell us that there is no horizontal stretch or compression. Now, when we look at the vertical changes, again, we'll look from A to B and A prime to B prime. So looking on my graph, if I go to point A and I go down to point B, my vertical change is going down 16 units. And on my blue graph, going from A prime to B prime is going down 8 units. In order to get from negative 16 to negative 8, your y values would have had to been multiplied by 1/2. Oh. No, wow. There we go. No idea. There's two nice circles. I don't know why they're appearing. We'll just have to think of happy faces inside. Okay. So now what we can do is we can take that information, and above my first arrow, this is the first thing we figured out. We figured out that my x values got multiplied by 1, and my y values by 1/2. So what does that mean? This point is going to stay 0 and 2. And multiplying by 1/2, that would change this to 4 and this to -4. And if you figure out those stretches and compressions, now I think mental math, you can see a pattern. What possibly could I do, moving left and right, to go from 0 to -2 that also works to go from 2 to 0? Can you? Yes, excellent. You see that you have to go 2 to the left. And then our y values is 2. Is there a pattern that goes from 4 to 0 that would be the same as going from -4 to -8? 4 down. So we have to compare the vertical and horizontal changes to get the first hint. What are we multiplying our x's by? What are we multiplying our y's by? And if you just guess and check, that can be very difficult. But once you figure that out, then moving left and right, up and down becomes easy. So, we've done our work. We need to write an equation. And the nice thing is, whatever equation we've written, we've already done the verification with our arrow diagram here. So it says write and verify. The verification is done. We just need to write the equation. So I'm going to write it here in blue because my equation is blue. The graph is labeled g of x, so I can either write y equals or g of x equals. You're technically allowed to write either y equals or g of x equals because this is labeled on the graph. G of x is equal to, what do we have? We have a vertical compression. 1/2 happens out in front of the function. In terms of f, there's stuff happening inside of f. Because x is by 1, I don't have to show any horizontal stretches or compressions, but I need to go 2 to the left. X's are liars. That'll be x plus 2. And then finally, 4 down. This is writing an equation. We have an equal sign and something on both sides, and we have it in terms of f, because f is on the right-hand side. Yeah, it says y by 1/2. So circle question number 9.